My name is Leonard Hayes. I am 71 years old, and 2 years after we buried my daughter, I found my grandchildren begging outside a crowded mall. I need you to sit with that for a moment, not rush past it, not scroll past it. Sit with it the way I had to sit with it when I saw them, my own blood, my daughter's children, on the cold pavement outside a shopping center on a Saturday afternoon, while people in expensive coats walked right past them like they were stray animals, like they were nothing, like they were invisible. I need you to understand what that does to a man, what that does to a 71-year-old man who already spent 2 years trying to hold himself together after lowering his only daughter into the ground. What that does to a grandfather who thought, who genuinely believed that even though the worst had already happened, at least those children were safe. At least they were being cared for. At least somebody was doing right by them. I was wrong. God help me, I was so wrong. And by the time this story is finished, by the time I tell you everything I uncovered, everything I discovered, every single layer of the rot that had been festering underneath the surface while I was grieving and trusting and sending money and trying to be respectful of a man I never should have trusted, you are going to understand why the anger in my chest has never fully cooled. Not once, not for a single day since that afternoon. So let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you everything, because the lies had only just begun. Before I tell you what I uncovered, if this story moves you at all, if it makes you feel anything, please like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there. I want to know who's listening, because for a long time, I felt like nobody was. My daughter's name was Nina Hayes. She was 38 years old when she died, and I want you to know that before anything else, because she was not a footnote. She was not a supporting character in this story. She was the whole reason any of it matters. She was bright and stubborn, and she laughed too loud in restaurants, and she called me every Sunday evening without fail. And when she stopped calling, the Sundays became the longest days of my life. She married a man named Kevin Prout when she was 32. I'll be honest with you, I had reservations from the beginning, not because of anything I could put my finger on clearly, not at first. It was more of an instinct, a discomfort that I couldn't quite name. Kevin was the kind of man who was always performing something, always performing gratitude, performing generosity, performing love. He said the right things at the right moments. He was good at reading a room and giving people what they wanted to see. I'd spent 38 years as a forensic accountant, 38 years looking at numbers that didn't add up and following them back to the person who cooked the books, and Kevin reminded me of the people I used to catch, not because of anything he did at first, just because of the way he presented himself, too smooth, too careful, too aware of how he was coming across. But Nina loved him, and Nina was not a foolish woman. She was sharp, and she was careful, and she had good judgment about most things, and so I told myself I was being a protective father. I told myself I was seeing problems that weren't there. I swallowed my discomfort, and I welcomed Kevin into the family, and I tried to give him a fair chance. They had 2 children, 2 beautiful children. My grandson Eli, who was 6 years old when his mother died, and my granddaughter Petra, who was 4. Eli with his serious eyes and his habit of asking questions that were too big for his age. Petra with her gap-toothed smile and the way she used to climb into my lap and fall asleep like there was nowhere safer in the world. Nina died in the spring, a blood clot, sudden, devastating, utterly without warning. She was there and then she wasn't, and there is no way to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it what it means to lose a child. It is the most violent kind of grief there is. It rewires something fundamental in you. It takes the floor out from under your feet and leaves you standing in midair, and you just have to keep standing there because the world keeps turning and there are grandchildren to think about, and a funeral to arrange, and a son-in-law who needs support, and so you don't get to fall apart completely, even though every single cell in your body wants to. The funeral was on a Tuesday, cold for spring, the kind of gray sky that feels personal, like the weather is participating in your sorrow. There were maybe 150 people there. Nina had friends, she had colleagues, she had a whole life I could only partially see. Kevin stood at the front in a dark suit and he cried. He cried publicly and visibly, and people put their hands on his shoulders and told him how sorry they were, and I stood a few feet away and watched and felt that old discomfort again. that instinct I'd been suppressing for 6 years, and I pushed it back down. Because what kind of man looks at his son-in-law crying at his daughter's funeral and feels suspicious? What kind of father does that? I'll tell you what kind. The kind who should have trusted his instincts from the beginning. At the reception afterward, Kevin pulled me aside. He took me by the elbow in that practiced way he had, that way that looked like warmth but always felt like steering, and he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Leonard, I want you to know that the kids are my first priority. Everything I do from here is for them. You don't need to worry about a thing. I'll handle the finances, I'll handle everything. The kids need stability right now, and I'm going to give them that. You've done enough. You've already done so much. You've done enough, you've already done so much." I have turned those words over in my head approximately 10,000 times in the 2 years since he said them. I have examined them from every angle, and what I understand now, with the clarity that only comes after you've seen the full picture, is that those words were not gratitude. They were a boundary. They were him telling me, in the politest possible way, to stay back, to stay out, to let him operate without interference. And I listened. God forgive me, I listened. I offered support. I offered to come stay for a few weeks to help with the children while Kevin adjusted. He said they needed space to grieve as a family. I offered to take the children for the summer to give Kevin time to stabilize. He said the kids needed routine, needed their home, needed consistency. Every offer I made, he had a reason why it wasn't the right time, wasn't the right approach, wasn't what was best for the children. And every time, his reasoning sounded caring. It sounded thoughtful. It sounded like a father who had his children's best interests at heart. I started sending money, $2,000 a month, which was not nothing on a retirement income, but Nina was my daughter and those were her children, and money was the only form of support Kevin would actually accept from me. He cashed every check, every single one for 22 months. Never once said he didn't need it, never once said things were fine, just cashed the checks and sent me occasional photos of the children and kept me at a comfortable, managed distance. The visits grew less frequent. At first, I was seeing the children every 6 weeks or so, then it became every 3 months. Then Kevin started mentioning that they'd moved, a fresh start, he said, a new neighborhood, new school, better for the kids to have a clean break from the memories. He gave me a new address. I sent cards to it. I never visited it because every time I tried to arrange a visit, something came up. Kevin had work. The kids were sick. There was a conflict with the school schedule. There was always something. The phone calls changed too. When I called to speak with Eli and Petra, Kevin would sometimes put them on, but the calls became shorter, more monitored feeling, like the children were choosing their words carefully. I told myself they were grieving. I told myself children process loss in complicated ways. I told myself I was reading too much into things because I was lonely and heartbroken and missing my daughter, and projecting my anxiety onto a situation that was fine. I spent 2 years telling myself it was fine. I want to tell you about the Saturday I drove to the Galton Park Mall because I needed to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy there and run a few other errands. Ordinary Saturday, nothing special. I parked on the north side of the lot, which I don't usually do, but the south entrance was crowded and I wasn't in the mood to circle. I was walking from the car toward the entrance when I saw them. 2 children sitting on the pavement beside the main doors, not playing, not waiting for a parent who'd stepped inside, sitting in the deliberate, resigned way that told you they'd been there for a while. They had a piece of cardboard between them, torn from a box, the printing on the inside still showing, and someone had written on the blank side with a marker. I was too far away to read it yet, but I could see that one of the children was a boy with serious eyes. I stopped walking. My heart did something I don't have a word for, not just recognition, something more physical than that. Like every piece of my body understood what my brain was still trying to process. I walked faster, then I was running, or whatever passes for running when you're 71 years old with a replaced hip, moving as fast as I could across that parking lot, and the closer I got the more certain I became, and by the time I was 10 feet away, I was absolutely sure. Eli, Petra. My grandchildren. Sitting on the cold pavement outside a mall. Petra's coat was too small, the sleeves ended above her wrists. Eli's shoes had a crack across the toe of the left one. Their faces were thin in a way that faces shouldn't be thin, hollow around the eyes. The kind of thinness that comes from not enough food over not enough days. Petra had a smear of something on her cheek that she hadn't bothered to wipe away, or maybe didn't have anything to wipe it with. The cardboard sign said, "Hungry, please help, God bless." Shoppers walked past. One woman looked down and then quickly away. A man with shopping bags in both hands stepped around them without breaking stride. A teenager glanced at his phone. Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. They walked past my grandchildren like they were part of the pavement. Eli saw me first, and the look on his face, I'm never going to forget that look for as long as I live. It was not relief, it was fear. For just 1 second before recognition replaced it, there was pure fear on my 8-year-old grandson's face when he saw an adult approaching him. What does it take to put that kind of fear into a child? What does a child have to experience before their first reaction to an adult walking toward them is terror? Then he recognized me, and then his face crumpled in a way that broke what was left of my heart. "Grandpa," he said, and that was all he could get out before the tears came. I got down on the pavement with them. My knees screamed about it and I didn't care. I pulled them both into my arms and I held them and I felt how thin they were, how small, how cold their little hands were. And I held them and I tried to breathe, and I tried not to let them see how terrified I was, because they needed calm, not panic. They needed a grandfather, not a man falling apart on the pavement. "When did you last eat?" I asked Eli when they'd settled a little. He thought about it. The fact that he had to think about it is still the thing that haunts me most. "Yesterday," he said, "we had crackers." I stood up. I picked Petra up and held her with one arm, and I took Eli's hand with the other, and I said, "We're going to get some food right now, and then we're going home with me, okay?" And Eli's face did something complicated, something that looked like relief and fear at the same time. And he said, very quietly, so that I almost didn't hear it over the noise of the parking lot, "Dad said we have to collect enough before we go back." I had to take several slow breaths, very slow breaths. "How much is enough?" I asked. Eli shrugged. He didn't know, he'd never known. There was no enough, there was just sitting until his father decided they'd sat long enough. "We're going to get food," I said again. "Everything else can wait." I fed them in the Mal food court. Real food, not crackers, not whatever scraps had been available to them. I watched them eat and I kept my face calm and my hands steady, and inside I was burning with a rage so clean and so focused it felt almost like grief. Maybe it was grief. Maybe by that point, the two things had become the same thing. While they ate, I asked gentle questions. Easy questions. "How's school? What have you been doing lately?" Eli answered carefully, like someone who'd learned to be careful. Petra mostly focused on her food, with the single-minded concentration of a child who'd been hungry too many times recently. Then Petra, who was 6 years old and didn't yet understand why adults sometimes kept secrets, looked up from her plate and said, without any particular drama, "Daddy doesn't stay at our house at night." Eli's head snapped toward her. "Petra." "He told us not to tell," she continued, still looking at her food, still eating. "But he also said we can't tell who we are when people ask, so I don't know which thing to say." I looked at Eli. Eli looked at the table. "Grandpa," he said very quietly, "Dad says once he sells the house, everything will be easier." "Which house?" I asked. He told me the address. It was the address of the house Nina and Kevin had bought together. The house where Eli and Petra had been born. The house I had helped with the down payment on 10 years ago as a wedding gift to my daughter. "Does your dad live there?" I asked. Eli shook his head. "Where does he live?" A long pause, then, "He has another place. He says it's for work. He says we'd just be in the way." He says we'd just be in the way. 7 words. 7 words that a child should never have had to hear from their parent, and certainly should never have remembered and repeated back with the matter-of-fact acceptance that comes from hearing something often enough that it stops feeling like a wound and just starts feeling like the truth. I paid the check. I put them in my car, and on the way to my house, with Petra already asleep in the back seat from the combination of food and warmth, and the release of tension she'd probably been carrying for weeks. Eli said, from the back seat, in a voice so small I could barely hear it over the heater, "Grandpa, we weren't supposed to tell you. Dad said if we told you, bad things would happen." "What kind of bad things?" I asked. "He said you'd try to take us away from him, and then we'd go to a place where nobody wants us." I kept my eyes on the road. I kept my voice steady. "Eli," I said, "you are the most wanted person I know. You and your sister both. You have always been wanted. You will always be wanted. Do you understand me?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dad says we cost too much." And that was the moment, that specific sentence, in my car on an ordinary Saturday afternoon, when the grief finished burning off, and what was left underneath was pure fury. The cleanest, coldest, most focused anger I have ever felt in 71 years of living. Because I knew then, with the certainty that comes from nearly 4 decades of following financial dishonesty back to its source, that what was happening to these children was not neglect born of overwhelm or grief or incompetence. It was deliberate, it was calculated, and it was being run by a man who had stood at my daughter's grave and made me a promise. At my house, I ran them baths. Warm water, clean towels, soap that smelled like something good. I found clothes from a box I'd kept, things they'd left from a visit 2 years ago, too small now but clean. I made soup. I sat at my kitchen table and I watched them eat a second meal, and I let myself feel, for just a moment, what it meant to have them there. Warm, safe, fed. Then I let myself feel what it meant, that they hadn't been any of those things before. After they were asleep, Petra in the spare room, Eli on the couch with every blanket I owned piled on top of him, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that got cold while I was thinking, and I organized what I knew. Kevin Prout had abandoned his children to a bare minimum rental while he lived elsewhere. He'd been sending them out to beg for money on the street. He told them not to identify themselves. He told them they cost too much. He told them their grandfather was a threat. He'd been cashing my monthly checks for 22 months. He'd mentioned selling the house that had been in Nina's name. And somewhere in there was a life insurance policy, because Nina had been meticulous about such things. She'd been an organized person, a prepared person, and I knew with absolute certainty that she'd had life insurance because we'd talked about it. I'd helped her think through the options when she and Kevin bought the house. I may be 71 years old, I may be retired, but I spent 38 years as a forensic accountant investigating financial fraud, and I know what a financial crime smells like, and this smelled like one. I called Kevin's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear music in the background. Faintly, the kind of ambient restaurant music that means you're somewhere expensive. "Leonard," he said, and his voice was wary. He knew. He already knew from the time of night and the fact that I was calling at all that something had changed. "I have Eli and Petra," I said. "They're at my house, they're safe, they're fed, they're asleep." "Silence. We need to talk," I said. "What did they tell you?" he asked. "Not how did this happen, not are they okay, what did they tell you?" "Kevin," I said, "I found my grandchildren sitting on pavement outside a mall with a cardboard sign. That's not something I need them to explain to me. That's something I need you to explain to me." And then the mask dropped. Not all the way, not immediately, but I heard the shift in his voice, the subtle change in register from performed grief-stricken widower to something harder and more irritated. "They were participating in a fundraising event," he said, "a community thing. You've blown this completely out of proportion." "A fundraising event," I repeated. "Yes, for charity. Kids do things like that, Leonard. It builds character." "My grandchildren told me they haven't eaten since yesterday," I said. "They told me you don't stay at their apartment at night. They told me you're planning to sell the house." "I'm not having this conversation," he said. His voice had gone flat. "The performance was over. You have no legal rights here. They are my children. You will bring them home tomorrow morning, and if you don't, I will call the police and report you for taking them without my permission." "I strongly encourage you to call the police," I said. He hung up. I sat for a while longer with my cold coffee. Then I got up, went to my study, opened my laptop, and began doing what I had spent my career doing. I began following the money. Property records are public. It took me less than an hour to confirm what I'd suspected. The house had been refinanced 8 months after Nina's death. The mortgage had increased by over $200,000. Kevin had pulled equity out of the house. And the house, as I had to verify through a title search that took me the better part of that night, was still technically in the estate, which meant it was subject to probate, which meant Kevin didn't have clear authority to sell it without going through a legal process that would have attracted scrutiny. He'd been trying to move fast enough to get there before anyone noticed. The life insurance took more work to trace, but I had contacts from my working years and I knew how to look. Nina had carried a policy, I'd remembered the company, and her meticulous record-keeping meant that among the boxes of her things that Kevin had given me after the funeral, there was a filing folder with insurance documents. I'd stored it without looking at it, because looking at it hurt too much, but now I pulled it out. The policy was for $400,000. The beneficiary, this is what made my hands shake when I read it, the beneficiary had been changed. 6 months before Nina died, from the Children's Trust she'd set up to Kevin Prout directly. I don't know when he talked her into that change. I don't know what he told her. I don't know if she understood what she was signing, or if he presented it as routine paperwork, or if there was something else happening that I never knew about. What I know is that 6 months before my daughter died, Kevin arranged to make himself the sole beneficiary of her $400,000 life insurance policy. He'd collected that money, $400,000, on top of the $200,000 he'd pulled from the house equity, on top of the 22 months of my money at $2,000 a month, on top of whatever else he'd been doing. And my grandchildren had been eating crackers. I called a private investigator first thing Monday morning. His name was Carl Webb, a former state investigator, meticulous, discreet, someone I'd worked with professionally years before. I told him what I had and what I suspected and what I needed to know. Carl called me back 4 days later. Kevin Prout was living in a luxury condominium downtown. Monthly rent that I won't specify because the number will make you physically ill in the context of what his children were enduring. He was living there with a woman named Tara. They'd apparently been together for at least a year, possibly longer. Surveillance showed a lifestyle that could generously be described as comfortable. Restaurants, trips, new car in the building's garage. Carl had photographs. The children were in a 2-room rental in a neighborhood 40 minutes away. Carl had driven past it. He described it carefully, in the neutral language of a professional who has learned not to editorialize, and even through that careful language, I could hear what he was actually saying, which was that it was not a place where children should be living, and that the children there were not being adequately cared for. But that was not the worst of it. That was not even close to the worst of it. Carl had found something else. Kevin Prout had been running an online fundraiser. The title of it, and I want you to understand that I am reading this to you exactly as it was written, because the audacity of it deserves to be stated plainly. The title was, "Single Dad Raising 2 Kids After Losing My Wife, Just Trying to Keep Our Heads Above Water." He had raised, over the course of 14 months, more than $60,000 from strangers on the internet who believed they were helping a grieving widower keep his family together. $60,000. He had photographs of Eli and Petra on the fundraiser page. Sweet, heartbreaking photographs. Photographs that people had looked at and opened their wallets for because they believed they were helping those children. Not one penny of that $60,000 had been spent on those children. Carl had traced as much as he could. It had gone into Kevin's personal account and then into his lifestyle. Restaurants, travel, the condo, Tara. He had monetized the death of my daughter. He had turned his own children into props for a sympathy campaign and pocketed the money. He had sent them out to beg on the street while he lived in a luxury apartment with his girlfriend and told strangers online that he was struggling. I want you to feel the full weight of that. I want you to sit with what kind of person does that. What kind of calculation goes into that decision? What kind of relationship with other human beings, including your own children, including the children of the woman you claim to love, allows you to look at two hungry kids and see a revenue stream? I have spent 38 years investigating fraud. I have seen people do things for money that most would find incomprehensible. And what Kevin Prute did still sits in a category of its own in my understanding of human behavior, because it wasn't just fraud. It was conducted against children who had already lost their mother, against children who were already as vulnerable as children can be. And it was conducted with a level of coldness that I still, if I'm honest, find difficult to fully absorb. I had my attorney, a family law specialist named Ruth Carey, who had been recommended by a colleague and who turned out to be exactly the kind of lawyer you want in exactly this kind of situation, file for emergency custody on a Thursday. We had the evidence organized: surveillance photographs, bank records, property records, the insurance documents, the fundraiser. The Mal security footage that I'd obtained after the fact, which showed Eli and Petra sitting in front of that entrance for 3 hours and 40 minutes that Saturday. 3 hours and 40 minutes. The Mal had cameras. I know exactly how long they sat there, alone, while their father was doing something else somewhere else, and the children he'd told strangers he was struggling to raise were sitting on concrete with a cardboard sign. The emergency hearing was on a Friday. Kevin showed up with an attorney, expensive one, which I noted and said nothing about. He sat across from me in that courtroom, and he looked at me with an expression I can only describe as contempt, and it occurred to me that this was the first time I'd seen his face without any performance on it, without any grief or gratitude or warmth or concern layered over the top, just the actual face underneath, and it was cold. His attorney argued that I had taken the children without consent, that I was an unstable elderly man with a grudge against his client, that the fundraiser was a legal and legitimate way of seeking financial help during a difficult time, that the children's living situation, while modest, was adequate, that I had no legal standing to make claims about the welfare of his client's children. Ruth presented our evidence methodically and without drama. That's what I'd hired her for, not theatrics, just precision, surveillance documentation, financial records, the fundraiser, the insurance beneficiary change, the equity extraction, the children's statements taken carefully and properly by a child welfare specialist. The testimony from the Mal: there had been a security guard who had spoken to the children that afternoon, and he was willing to testify about what he'd seen and what Eli had told him about how long they'd been there and why. The judge granted temporary custody to me before noon. Kevin stood up when the ruling came down. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Kevin shook it off. He looked at me across that courtroom and he said, out loud, in front of the judge, in front of both attorneys, "You're going to regret this, old man." The judge gave him a look that could have stripped paint. I did not respond. I sat with my hands folded on the table and I let the moment be what it was, because I had learned in 38 years of professional life that the moment when someone exposes their actual character is a gift. You don't interrupt it, you let them give it to you completely. What came next was ugly. I want to be honest with you about that. Getting justice, when the person you're fighting is willing to do anything, is ugly, and it is slow, and it is exhausting, and there are moments when you cannot believe you are still fighting. Kevin filed a complaint with Child Protective Services, claiming that I was an unstable influence on the children and that my home environment was unsuitable. CPS investigated. They're required to, regardless of the apparent motivation behind a complaint, and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. I live in a clean, stable home. I have the resources to care for children. I had no history of anything that would raise concerns. The complaint was closed quickly. He launched a social media campaign, posts about how his father-in-law had kidnapped his children out of jealousy and a desire for control. Comments from people who didn't know anything about the situation expressing outrage on his behalf. I was described as controlling, vindictive, as a man who had never accepted Kevin into the family and was now using his daughter's death as an excuse to steal his grandchildren. Some of those posts were shared widely. I had people, strangers, sending me angry messages for a period of about 2 weeks. My neighbor, a woman named Gloria who had known me for 15 years, asked me carefully one afternoon if everything was okay, because she'd seen something online and she was worried. I told her the truth, not the social media version, the actual version, the crackers, the cardboard sign, the $60,000, the luxury condo, the girlfriend. Gloria was quiet for a long time and then she said, "Leonard, what can I do to help?" And that small moment of being believed by someone who knew me, that meant more than I can easily say. But the situation escalated further before it resolved. Carl, who'd continued on retainer while everything progressed legally, called me one morning with something new. He'd obtained, through means that were legal and that I won't detail further, a recorded phone conversation and a string of text messages between Kevin and Tara. In the texts, Kevin referred to Eli and Petra as the problem. He talked about the custody situation as a temporary setback. And then there was a text that I am going to read to you because I believe you need to hear the exact words. "Once I liquidate what's left and this old man is out of the picture, we can make the move. I'm not spending the next 10 years chained to 2 kids who weren't even my idea." He was planning to leave the country. Carl had found evidence of research into international relocation, specifically countries with limited extradition agreements. He was planning to move abroad, liquidate whatever assets remained, and leave Eli and Petra behind. He'd apparently discussed with Tara the possibility of putting them into the foster care system, describing this as the cleanest solution. The cleanest solution. To abandon his children, the children of my daughter, the children he had collected insurance money for and fundraiser money for and my money for, the cleanest solution was to hand them to the state and disappear. I gave everything Carl had uncovered to Ruth and to the district attorney's office, which had by now opened a criminal investigation. The fraud was extensive enough and documented thoroughly enough that it had moved well past a family law matter. We were talking about wire fraud, child endangerment, misappropriation of estate funds, and potentially other charges that I'll let the legal professionals classify correctly. The final hearing was on a Wednesday morning in October. Almost 5 months after the Saturday, I found Eli and Petra on that pavement. 5 months of lawyers and investigators and CPS and social media attacks and sleepless nights, and in between all of it, making breakfast and helping with homework, and sitting outside watching Petra on the swing set I'd assembled in the backyard on a weekend afternoon when I needed to do something useful with my hands. Kevin walked into that courtroom looking like a different man than he'd been in the first hearing. Some of the polish was gone. He was thinner. The attorney he had this time was less expensive. The first one had apparently withdrawn when the criminal implications became clear. His new attorney was doing his best with what he had, which was very little. Ruth presented our case, all of it, every piece, the financial forensics laid out in a way that was clear even to someone with no accounting background. The fundraiser, the insurance, the equity, the texts, the recorded call, the children's statements, the Mal security footage, the surveillance, the testimony of Carl and 2 other witnesses. She was calm and precise and thorough, and I sat beside her and watched 22 months of deception get disassembled in front of a judge, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of Kevin Pruitt's story except the ugly truth underneath it. Kevin's attorney argued what he could, that the texts were taken out of context, that the fundraiser, while perhaps ill-advised, was not illegal, that Kevin was a grieving man who had made poor decisions under impossible emotional pressure. The judge listened, she took notes, she asked a few precise questions, and then she ruled. Permanent custody transferred to me, Leonard Hayes, grandfather of Eli and Petra. Restitution ordered for documented misuse of estate funds and fraudulent fundraising. The criminal charges, and there were multiple, were referred for prosecution. Kevin would be facing those separately. I will not speculate here about the exact outcome of those proceedings because they are ongoing and because that is not the point of this story. Kevin sat very still when the ruling came down. No outburst this time, no threats. He looked diminished, like something had gone out of him in the months since the first hearing Some essential energy that had been keeping the performance running had finally run dry. His attorney touched his arm and he didn't react. I looked at him once, just once, and then I looked away, because he was no longer the main character of this story as far as I was concerned. He had been the obstacle. He had been the thing I had to move through to get to what mattered. What mattered was waiting for me at home. I want to tell you about a Tuesday morning in November, about 3 weeks after the final hearing. I want to tell you about this specific morning because it is the thing I come back to when the anger gets too loud. The morning is the antidote to the anger, or at least the thing that makes the anger bearable. Eli came downstairs at 7:15. He's gotten into the habit of coming downstairs earlier than he needs to for school, and making himself useful in small ways, setting out the cereal boxes, checking that there's juice in the refrigerator, things like that. Small acts of contribution that I've come to understand are his way of participating, of having a role, of making himself feel like a part of something rather than a burden on it. I was making eggs, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing extraordinary, ordinary breakfast food, the kind that had been in my repertoire for 50 years. Eli climbed onto the stool at the kitchen counter and propped his chin on his hands and watched me cook. "Grandpa," he said, are we staying here, like for real staying here, not just for now?" I turned from the stove and looked at him. He was watching me with those serious eyes, those eyes that had been serious since, before he could have had reasons for them to be serious. And that had become even more serious in the past 2 years from reasons he absolutely should not have had. "For real staying here," I said. "This is your home, you and Petra both, for as long as you want it to be." He thought about this for a moment, the way he thinks about things, with his whole face engaged. "Mom would be glad," he said. I turned back to the eggs so he wouldn't see my face for a moment. "Yeah," I said, "she would." Petra appeared at the bottom of the stairs in her socks, her hair a mess, demanding to know if there was orange juice. There was. She climbed up next to her brother and they bickered briefly and good-naturedly about something inconsequential, and I stood at the stove making ordinary scrambled eggs on an ordinary Tuesday morning and felt something that was not quite peace. I am not sure I am capable of peace exactly, not yet, maybe not ever, but was something in the same neighborhood. Something that said, "This is right, this is how it should be." There is a photograph of Nina on the mantelpiece in my living room. It's from a birthday, one of hers. I think she was 30 or 31. She's laughing at something that's off camera and the joy in her face is unguarded and complete. The kind of joy that photographs almost never capture because most people see a camera and compose themselves, but this one caught her in an honest moment. I look at it most days. I talk to it sometimes, which I know sounds like what it sounds like, but I do it anyway. I stood in front of it the evening after the final hearing, just stood there for a while. "I couldn't save you," I said. "I tried, I would have given anything, but I couldn't." "The photograph was just a photograph," she didn't answer. "But I saved them," I said. "I need you to know that. I found them and I brought them home, and I am not going to let anything hurt them again. That's my promise to you, the one I'm actually keeping." I started this story by telling you my name and my age, and what I found on that Saturday afternoon, and I want to close it the same way, directly, without decoration. My name is Leonard Hayes. I am 71 years old. I spent 38 years following dishonesty back to its source, and when the most important investigation of my life arrived, I was ready for it. When my daughter could no longer protect her children, I protected them instead. I am furious. I want to be clear about that. I am still furious. I am furious that Nina died and couldn't protect them herself. I am furious that I spent 22 months trusting a man who was using my trust as cover for what he was doing. I am furious that I sent that man $2,000 a month for nearly 2 years while his children ate crackers. I am furious that strangers on the internet sent him money because they believed a story he built on the rubble of my daughter's death. I am furious that those children spent 2 years in circumstances that no child should experience, and that they adapted to it because children do, because children are resilient in ways that would break an adult, but they shouldn't have to be. That resilience should not have been required. It should never have been required. I am furious at myself too, that has to be said. I am furious at every moment I dismissed my instincts, at every phone call I took at face value, at every check I sent without asking hard enough questions, at every visit I didn't push hard enough to make happen. I was trying to be respectful, trying not to overstep, trying to honor the grief of a man I thought was genuinely grieving. And in doing so, I failed to see what was actually happening to my grandchildren for 2 years. I will carry that. I am not asking for absolution for it. I'm just telling you it's there. But here is the other thing that is also true. Eli is enrolled in a school where his teacher calls me every Friday to tell me how he's doing, not because anything is wrong, just because she understands that this child needs people in his corner who want to know. Petra has started drawing again. She'd apparently stopped for most of the past year and a half, and one day in late September, she came home from school with a drawing she'd made in art class, a house with a sun above it and 2 figures in the yard, and she handed it to me and said, "That's us, Grandpa. I have it on my refrigerator. It will stay there." Every morning I make breakfast. Every evening I make sure they're fed and warm and that their homework is done and that someone asks them how their day was and actually listens to the answer. Every night I check the locks and sit for a moment in the quiet of a house that has children in it again, and I think about my daughter and I breathe. I could not save her. That loss is permanent and it is enormous and it will never fully stop hurting. There is no resolution to losing a child. There is no chapter at the end of that story where the grief makes sense and the wound closes. You just carry it. You carry it and you keep going because the alternative is stopping, and you cannot stop when there are people who need you to keep moving. But I saved her children. I brought them home. I sat on cold pavement in a parking lot and gathered them up and brought them home. And whatever else I was not able to do, whatever else I failed at, whatever mistakes I made in the 2 years I lost to misplaced trust, I did that. And when Eli asks me, years from now, what I did when I found out what was happening to him and his sister, I will be able to tell him that I did not hesitate, that the fury in my chest became fuel, and that fuel kept me moving through every court date and every legal document and every sleepless night and every social media attack until there was nothing left between my grandchildren and safety. I am 71 years old. I am raising 2 children. Some days it is hard in the ordinary ways that raising children is hard. Some days it is hard in ways specific to these children and what they survived, in the flinches that are becoming less frequent and the questions that come out of nowhere and the occasional bad dream that brings Petra to my bedroom door at 2 in the morning and requires me to sit with her until the dark stops feeling dangerous. I do all of it. I will keep doing all of it for as long as I am able, because Nina is gone and she cannot do it, and so I will. That's what I have to tell you. That's the whole story. I couldn't save my daughter, but I saved her children. And I dare anyone to tell me that isn't enough.